Welcome to the Common Man Football Show. My name is James Coburn, and today's episode, we're going to get into some NFL draft talk. It's midpoint of the season right now. Actually a little bit further than the midpoint, and I just got done with a big quarterback collection, quarterback data collection, and I wanted to get into some quarterback analytics because there's been a lot of talk about the quarterbacks in this class. About regression, about none of them are good. There's been a lot of reports that the production just isn't there, and a lot of misinformation, and a lot of guys saying, oh, so-and-so player went from a top overall pick to a top 10 pick. We're going to unpack a lot of that stuff. And for those that are probably new to this type of content, I've done a lot of this content in the past, but if you're new to this type of content, all terms and definitions will be in the description. So I'm going to be talking about things like FBS Stat Score. I'm going to be talking about strength of schedule. I'm going to be talking about high school production score. All those terms are going to be in the description. So if you're not familiar with anything that I'm talking about, I'll try to explain a little bit about, along the way. But we're going to get into a couple of details here and there that I think some of the new people to the channel may not be 100% on board with or know. But we're just going to dive right into it. So I recently updated some things and finished some things, and just to make sure everything was completely accurate. The first one I put out, there was a little bit of mistake with the software in terms of touchdown and reception ratio for the new data I inputted. So I fixed that up, and this is what I got so far. So based on all the data I've been able to do, and this is based on data since the 1958 NFL draft class, the vast majority, 95% of multiple All-Pro quarterbacks in that time span had at least a QB score. FBS Stat Score is another term for it, but they had at least a 90 percentile plus score for the multiple All-Pro types. And we're talking, Dan Marino, John Elway, all those guys, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Montana, all those players in question had Roger Staubach. All those players were 90 plus percentile scores in college. And most of the Pro Bowlers, 92% of the Pro Bowlers, had at least 80 or higher in terms of their production score, with the only players in question. So I'll get the outliers out of the way. The outliers were Matt Hasselbeck, Brett Favre, Drew Bledsoe, and Michael Vick. There's only been 4 quarterbacks who failed to meet these particular standards who went on to become like a multiple All-Pro, multiple Pro Bowl type. But for the most part, the trends have been this, and the reason why I pay attention to the trends is because they're trends. Like, these are traits like any other trait. I mean, you should treat this the same as a quarterback's ability to look off coverage, because if most of the great quarterbacks score in the 90 percentile of this particular score, and most of the Pro Bowlers score in the 80 percentile, then you should start looking at these quarterbacks. And that's the basic thing I want to say is this by no means means that all the quarterbacks that I'm going to be talking about right now are going to go on to become All-Pro and Pro Bowl players. It's just that the majority of the All-Pro and Pro Bowl players scored in these areas, and these are quarterbacks to pay attention to because of that fact. It doesn't throw away film study. It doesn't throw away any of that other stuff. You need to be doing film study. You need to be doing all these other sort of factors and doing the character interviews and doing all the other stuff. But you do need to realize that you shouldn't ignore certain players. Like Dak Prescott, for example. Dak Prescott was a guy that had a 90-plus percentile quarterback score. Everybody ignored him, went in the 4th round, ended up being a great success. Russell Wilson, another guy who had a 90-plus percentile quarterback score. Everybody ignored him. 3rd round pick, ends up being Russell Wilson. So, and even Tom Brady. Tom Brady was a 90-plus percentile quarterback score player. And he became a multiple All-Pro player. Everybody ignored him. Everybody didn't care about him. He ended up being Tom Brady. So the data overwhelmingly shows that if you're paying attention to this, if you're getting these guys on your radar, and you have a good scouting approach in favor of you, you could get values like that. You could get a quarterback in the 4th or 3rd round who could potentially become that player because you're looking at the traits that made that player who he was. And again, not every player who scores really high is going to end up being the next Dak Prescott or the next Tom Brady or the next whatever. But you should be trying to narrow the list down, to get these quarterbacks on your radar, because some of these guys could end up being that. And that's the basic thing I want to get out of the way. So when you look at the data so far, so this is 2017 at the midpoint. And these are all the quarterbacks that performed. At least they had at least a 90-plus score or a 80-plus score. And these are all the quarterbacks so far that did that. So we're talking about the top quarterback so far in college football based on this methodology is Manny Wilkins. So far, now he is a redshirt sophomore. Haven't heard any buzz about him whatsoever. So I'm really not going to trumpet him. I haven't even watched his film yet, to be honest. But he's definitely a guy who I would say you should maybe check out, and see how he's doing and see how he's performing, because he's performing really well. He's the best quarterback in the Pac-12 even based on all this data. So he's a guy that I definitely think you should check out. Everybody knows about Baker Mayfield. Amazing efficiency at every year at Oklahoma. He's been amazing in terms of his efficiency. So we're going on three 90+ percentile seasons for Baker Mayfield up to this point. So shouldn't be surprising he's on here. A surprise though is Ryan Finley of North Carolina State, and I'll get into him more later on in the show. But he's definitely an interesting player here. Of course, you have JT Barrett, who's on here as well. Jalen Hurts from Alabama. He's not eligible, though. He's a sophomore. Kenny Hill is on this list as well. He has some questions. There are some questions with him, but he's definitely here. Max Brown is on the list as well. Nick Shimonik. I'm probably saying that wrong. Sorry, Texas Tech fans. But he's definitely here. Mason Rudolph, of course, here. Trace McSorley here, a guy that hasn't really gotten a lot of buzz. I haven't heard almost any Trace McSorley love or talk or anything, but he's definitely here. John Wolford from Wake Forest. Marcus Marion from Fresno State. Jake Browning from Washington. Shea Patterson from Ole Miss. He's not eligible, though. David Blau from Purdue. Brian Lewerke from Michigan State. Jarrett Stidham from Auburn. Mackenzie Milton from UCF. Nathan Stanley from Iowa. And Luke Falk from Washington State. So these are all the players that I would say you should have on your radar. Now, again, some of these players are not draft eligible. I haven't double-checked all these guys to see what their draft status is, but these are players that I think if you are in need of a quarterback and you're trying to find a quarterback, these are all the quarterbacks that are performing really well based on college stats, and I would say go check them out and let the film decide. Let the film decide if you think that they have what it takes. Don't let this influence you, though. Don't he scored 80 plus, so he's going to be amazing. Go watch him on film, and check him out. And I think some of these guys might actually be, good. So, actually good players. So, again, that's all I'm trying to say. So now when we get to some other facts and figures, so starting with the quarterbacks in this class, that I kind of wanted to point out. And basically what I'm going to get into is all the draft eligible quarterbacks. So all the quarterbacks that have gotten a lot of buzz in terms of their career data, because there's a lot of quarterbacks in this class, guys like Josh Rosen and all those different sort of guys. So there's a lot of stuff to unpack here because of that. But I just wanted to go through all the quarterbacks that have gotten buzz or are draft eligible or, whatever in terms of their stats so far. So starting with this list, so we got guys like Austin Allen. Austin Allen has not had a 80 plus or 90 plus percentile season in his career, and he actually regressed this year. So as much as there may be some Austin Allen fans out there, I would say avoid Austin Allen based on how he's performed. Baker Mayfield, probably one of the most efficient quarterbacks. Again, this is Mayfield from 2015, 2016, 2017, 90 plus, 90 plus, 90 plus. So he's definitely a guy that I think, if the draft started today, I would definitely consider him to be the top quarterback, if not near the top in terms of quarterbacks, in terms of him. Then you got Brett Riffin from Boise State. He's not been the best. He's regressed a bunch this year in particular, especially when it comes to touchdown and reception ratio. So I would honestly take Brett Riffin off the list. I think he should probably stay in school. Brogan Roback is a guy that I've heard some buzz about in the MAC, but really hasn't done, 38 and 22.68, just not amazing. Chase Litton from Marshall is a guy that has gotten a lot of buzz, but as you can clearly see, not in the 80 or 90 area in terms of his scores. So not a guy that I would definitely put a lot of stock in. Clayton Thorson has gotten first round buzz, but as you can clearly see here, not amazing in terms of his QB score, 13.96, 57.85, and this year's 31.87. So that's a guy that I would avoid. Danny Etling, another guy that I would avoid based on his overall data. David Blau is a guy that I would avoid based on past performance. He's peaking this year, but, and I'll get into career data later, but not the best. Like I don't like to bank on guys who peak in their final year. I'll just say that much. I'll get into that probably in another video, but he's definitely a guy I might avoid just because of his history at Purdue. Then you look at Drew Lock. Drew Lock is a guy that still hasn't really put it together. His best year is this year, but it's only 50.11 for him. Then you look at Eric Dungy from Syracuse. Still middling in the 70s range, not getting into that 80 range. JT Barrett has been really, really good consistently, but he has some questionable high school production stuff with him. Jake Browning is still in the 80 range, hasn't really got up into the 90 range yet in his career. And there's definitely some question. I mean, there's stuff on film that's definitely questionable with him. Jarrett Stidham from Auburn is in the 80s, but he only has 1 year of production, so that's definitely kind of worrisome. Josh Allen. Josh Allen went from a 26.07 score last year to a 14.46 score this year. I have no idea why Josh Allen was considered a potential top overall quarterback, and after the season, I'm still confused as to why people even consider him to be a day 2 pick, because he is honestly just a project based on all of his data up to this point. Look at Josh Rosen. Rosen has not yet really got back to his rookie season or freshman season, excuse me, in college football. And a consistent theme with him is his touchdown interception ratio. He's consistently had just a average touchdown interception ratio, which sounds a lot more like Jay Cutler than a multiple Pro Bowl, multiple All-Pro type. I'll just say that much. So Josh Rosen is not exactly being terrible per se. He has that freshman season to cling on to, but normally you want to see guys get better and not worse, or regress, I guess is the best way to put it. And Rosen definitely has regressed from his freshman season, which is never a thing you want to see when it comes to quarterbacks. Kenny Hill is having a great year, of course, like I said, but last year was so bad that it makes this year questionable. So, again, I just want to throw that out there. Kyle Allen, of course, is a guy coming into this year that's gotten some buzz from people. Not exactly amazing in terms of his overall scores. Lamar Jackson, I know I'm going to get some hate. That's fine. But Lamar Jackson, not the best passer when it comes to completion percentage. Or some other things to talk about, which I'll talk about later on the show. But as you can clearly see, just not getting into that 70 or 80 range, that 80 range even. Like, he's not been able to get into that Pro Bowl range or All-Pro range, which makes him really questionable to me in the future as a passer. As a runner, he's amazing, but as a passer, there's just a lot of question marks with him throughout his entire career. And he's gotten better every year, but just still tons of question marks because of his overall data. So yeah, in terms of him. And then, of course, you get to the last sort of quarterback. So Logan Woodside, for example, has gotten to the 80 range, but hasn't exactly been amazing. And this year has kind of regressed a bit when it comes to his completion percentage. You look at Luke Falk. He's regressed a bit in terms of touchdown interception ratio, but I think by the end of the year, he'll get back into the positive range. Of course, Manny Wilkins, the top quarterback so far in college football, it wasn't the best last year, but definitely has shown a ton of improvement this year. Mason Rudolph has also shown improvement overall. His career, as you can see in his career, he's shown overall improvement. Mike White has kind of took a dip. There was a lot of Mike White fans, of course, before the season, but he's kind of took a dip. Quentin Flowers also took a dip from his 2016 season, which is not the best thing that you want to see. Richard Legault from Indiana, pretty much the same as he did last year in terms of his data. Riley Ferguson is a guy I know that there's people big fans of, but he hasn't exactly gotten better from his 2016 season. Ryan Finley, of course, put up a really great season this year, but as you can see, last year he was pretty just average. So he's questionable from that standpoint. Sam Darnold, of course, has regressed from a 97.04 to a 62.69. So that's definitely worse. And then Trace McSorley has gotten better from a 67.48 to an 88.78, and his completion percentage has substantially increased, which is the biggest factor for him there. So overall, those are all the quarterbacks coming in. Getting into some high school data stuff. So if there was one quarterback again, and this is taking into the high school data and the college data. If there's one quarterback that I think is going to be that top guy in this class, I think it's going to be Baker Mayfield. If you look at his high school production, you look at his college production up to this point, pretty much flawless in every single area. So he's going to be a guy that, based on data, he will most likely end up being the top quarterback based on the data that I use in my methodology. I'm pretty sure at the end of the year, Baker Mayfield will be the number one quarterback when it comes to metric data. And the number one quarterback last year, just for everybody to know, was Deshaun Watson. Then you look at Mason Rudolph, another guy that I think if he sticks to this, he's going to look pretty good data-wise. Great high school production, good FBS production, and he could end up into that 90 range if he gets better this year, which we'll see. But he's definitely a guy to keep track of because he has gotten better every year. He's not Blake Bortles. I'm not going to do a whole video on him yet about that. I probably will. But there has been some he's Blake Bortles. He's not. He's better than Blake Bortles. And I think high school production-wise and college production-wise, he's another quarterback I definitely would put more attention to. Josh Rosen is a guy that, despite his issues in terms of regression, that is a question mark, and I'll get into more of that stuff in another video. But I think he still hit the bare minimum thresholds. He hit the bare minimum threshold for a Pro Bowl quarterback in terms of his FBS stuff, and he definitely had a very good high school production score. So there is a case to be made that Josh Rosen is still a viable top quarterback in this class, despite the regression that he's had, which the regression stuff is something I've been doing a little bit more work into, and I'll answer that in a future video. Then you look at Trace McSorley, another guy that has great high school production and is showing to be very good in maybe his final season. I would actually suggest he does come out this year because of age, but definitely a guy that I think everybody needs to be talking more about and putting more attention to, I guess. Like a guy that you really need to be looking for, I think it's Trace McSorley because of how well he's playing this year. Then you look at some wild card guys. Luke Falk didn't quite hit the Pro Bowl high school production data, but definitely hit the starter level. So Falk is a guy to keep a track of because of that factor. Ryan Finley is another quarterback that's very similar to Falk in terms of his pattern. Didn't quite hit Pro Bowl high school production, but definitely so far has hit really good FBS stat production, at least in his final year. So he's a guy that definitely keep track of in this particular quarterback class. You get into guys like Riley Ferguson. He's a guy that's gotten a lot of buzz, but again, just look, high school production doesn't hit the starter level or Pro Bowl level, and neither has his college production hit the Pro Bowl level. So he's a guy that I would say be cautious of with him. Lamar Jackson, same difference. Be cautious of this guy. Really low high school production. Did not hit the starter level or Pro Bowl level compared to every quarterback since the 2007 NFL draft class. And he has yet to register an 80-plus quarterback score, which just deals with everything. Efficiency, touchdown interception ratio, all that data. Like, Lamar, as a runner, is amazing. As a passer, people are putting way too much stock into him. In terms of him as a passer, he's a bigger project than most people realize is the best way to put it with him. So even though he is amazing, he has a ton of talent. I just think he's a bigger project than people realize. Then you look at Josh Allen, just to throw him in there. Didn't hit the high school production. Still, his best score is a 26.07, nowhere near Pro Bowl. He's basically a project. There's no way around it. He's a project quarterback. If you want to take him UDFA or late first or late third round, seventh round flyer, go ahead. If you think that this is a top 10 overall pick or a top overall pick, you got to be like, there's nothing to justify it, because there's never been a quarterback with this poor of a high school production score or even this poor of a college production score to get taken in the top 10 and become a sustainable starting quarterback at the NFL level. It's not worth it. The upside is not there because upside has as much to do with the development that you already have as it does your actual ability to play football. And that's the end. So again, those are just some quarterbacks to think about, some different data things to point out. I tried to include all the quarterbacks in here that I think most of you guys would be interested in. And again, check out those quarterbacks. You know, I've not seen all the quarterbacks that have been unearthed in this list. And again, just because they score well doesn't mean they're going to be a great quarterback. You need to watch the film. You need to have that to kind of back up what the data says, or it doesn't back up what it says. But data is a good way to show you guys that are performing really well and to get you to not overreact about guys. Because it's like Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson was a guy last year that people were overreacting his final season. His final season wasn't terrible. You know, he had an 80 plus score in his final season for Deshaun Watson. So he was not it wasn't like a Sam Darnold level fall, is all I'm trying to say. And hopefully people don't make that mistake, because Sam Darnold has a legit fall. You know, like he had a legit drop to his production versus what Deshaun Watson experienced. So don't fall for that. But when you look at the overall data, I think just check out the quarterbacks that were mentioned in this video. See what you see, all that kind of stuff. And hopefully that'll be good. But but again, the last thing I just want to point out, this quarterback class is not as bad as people are saying it is. I think there's a lot of viable quarterbacks in this class. I think people are just staring at the wrong ones. You know, people are just focusing in on just 3 dudes. One of them is terrible. The other 2 are kind of eh. Like, if you open your mind and you watch guys like Baker Mayfield more, you watch guys like Trace McSorley more and Mason Rudolph more, I think you'll be able to appreciate this quarterback class a little bit more. So that's just my general 2 cents. And of course, you can find my other work at draftcomer.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at Geometrics. And if you like this content and you want more content like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Share this video as well with anybody that you know, and I'll talk to you guys in the next video. Peace.